Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, Dan Higgins, Merschman Seeds Area Sales Manager for Western Illinois, joins us to give an area crop report. Ben discusses how to tackle persistent water hemp with Enlist products. If you've been dinged by Dicamba, we talk about the next steps to take. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes.
Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Dan Higgins, our area sales manager from Western Illinois, and Dan's going to give us a crop update. What are you seeing over there, Dan?
Oh, we're seeing a little bit of everything, really. We had such a different spring that we've got people planted in early April all the way up until I delivered beans yesterday for some late planting. Starting to see a little bit of Asian beetles move in, which really isn't a good thing, but seeing a lot of good growth though with the rain that we've gotten. Everything that was behind has really seemed to really shoot right up.
Pretty widespread rain over your area?
It is. We've had anywhere from above average rainfalls by several inches to an area that just the other day got their first 0.8 since early May.
I heard you say you had a call there earlier on some guys that had some funny looking beans, but they were growing so fast they looked weird.
They did. I had a guy that called and asked about Dicamba damage, and he said, all his beans just looked like crap, really. And I went and looked, and I could tell right away it wasn't anything Dicamba damage because they got that distinct curl to them or cupping more or less. And I went and looked at them, and those beans were a little bit later planted bean, and they had a lot of food, and they were dry for a while, and they finally caught a couple inches, and they just shot up. And when they do that, they call it rapid growth, and it tends to curl the leaf a little bit, and they don't look as as healthy as what they could, but they'll come out of it.
So how's the stuff that was planted early versus the stuff that's planted late? Have you seen much stress on the late planted stuff? How much replant have you kind of seen over there, I guess? Like, what does the corn crop look like and the bean crop look like early versus some of the later planted June stuff? Because there's probably a window, I just imagine, that you had like we did.
There is, and it truly depends on the area too. I know a bad window for a lot of people was around Mother's Day, but then I also know where that's some of the guys' best looking beans. I had a guy calling me wanting field signs ASAP because he needed to get them put up, and those were planted right around the Mother's Day weekend. They just missed some of the rains that a lot of people did. I still tend to think that the earlier planted stuff looks a little better than what the later planted did. I think a lot of the earlier stuff was able to get established better and was able to weather the storm a little bit better than what some of that mid stuff is. A lot of the later planted stuff is actually looking really well. Some of that I would say is probably just maybe a week or so behind what some of that earlier stuff is. It really had good ground temperatures and has caught the right amount of rains instead of the excessive amounts. That it's just had a really good life, really. Corn wise, it seems to be a pretty wide mix also. Overall, I think it's looking pretty healthy. I'm really concerned about some disease pressure moving in, especially as wet as it was early. I did get, actually right before I walked in here, I got a notification that gray leaf was moving into Illinois, so got to look out for that, and I think fungicide's going to be big this year. I did see just last week where there's been some wind damage on some fields. One of them was hurt pretty bad, and depending on what happens today, you never know what's going to happen here. Replant's been, in my area at least, hasn't been too bad. It's been mainly the big rains that have flooded stuff out. It hasn't been too much wind or hail or anything like that, like in some areas.
Yeah. So we're approaching that R3 in soybeans, and we are at tassel on some of the earlier planted stuff, tasseling for, that early May stuff, maybe a couple days away yet. Are a lot of growers thinking about fungicide? Are a lot of growers going to be applying fungicide on corn and soybeans? Is it a standard practice? Is it something that's new?
I'd say the guys that haven't done it in the past are looking a lot more towards it with the way the crop prices have been. In my opinion, I'd say this year it's really a no-brainer. I mean, it's been the cooler, especially on corn. It's been cooler. You need to protect yourself with that fungicide. I wouldn't be surprised if I see some guys doing a couple different applications of it, because when you do your fungicide, it only has 14 days of coverage at the max, and that doesn't cover your whole period of when you put your seed on. So I could see a couple different applications this year, especially with the cost of things. But I would say most people are probably looking at fungicide this year.
Is there a time that you don't want to use that fungicide bin on corn especially?
Well, from what I've gathered and talking to a lot of the retailers and the people that are selling the product, is a lot of the surfactants are different than what there was in the old days, in the headline days and the quilt days. That they don't have to use as much surfactant to get that product to stick on the leaves. So there's a lot. The newer products are a lot safer, so there really is a wider window of application. So for, let's say, my dad's operation for that I help with, I think we're going to pull the trigger, depending on what the rain looks like in the next 10 days, we're going to pull the trigger as soon as we can get a long enough window to get an airplane in, and then pull the trigger whether we're dropping pollen or not. So yeah. Ideally, I would have rather had it on by this point, because some of the newer SDHI triple stack that contain the SDHI have such a long window of exposure. I like to get it on a little bit early rather than a little bit late, because I want to protect that extra period to make sure that we don't have disease starting to set in. But I think it's really, really positive. So Dan, in your area, you've probably seen a lot of first post happening. How successful is the Enlist system worked? Are you seeing lots of good weed kills? Are you seeing any misses? Has it been a real positive, good experience with the growers that have first tried? I mean, this is their first year trying Enlist.
I have noticed a lot of guys that missed some of the window that with that first spray, and then got rain and then came in later, and there was a lot of out of control weeds, I guess I would say.
Taller than 4 inches.
Yes, and the Enlists with the 240 and Liberty has really came on and just knocked that stuff down. It's done a very good job in my area. I did have some phone calls about, their beans looking droopy, which I explained to them, that can happen. That's what the product is. It can cause that, and then a couple days later they looked fine again, and it's done a very good job at managing weed control this year.
Yep. So I was in northern Iowa this past week, and we were out in the field. They were questioning whether the water hemp was going to die, and I got some really good pictures that I haven't been able to capture last year, but I was in a field 2 years ago. But I got some really good pictures of what it looks like right before the water hemp actually starts to deteriorate and die. And we'll show some pictures here of basically the base of the water hemp plant will swell up and get almost, it's not woody, but it's kind of woody, where the base of the water hemp plant will swell up. You'll get a lot of natural, like super white, fine root hairs. They're a little bit bigger than fine root hairs, but you get a lot of root hairs off the main stems. And then if you split that water hemp plant in half, you can actually see just a slight yellowing of the crown of where that water hemp plant is at. And when the customer asks, okay, well, I have this 18-inch tall water hemp plant that was sprayed with Roundup and 2,4-D, is it going to die? Well, one way is to dig it up and see if that base is all swollen up, and if you're seeing a lot of those root hairs, you probably got it. But the surefire way, all you got to do is push up against that stalk, the bottom of the base a little bit, the crown of the plant, and most of the time, if it's working at that point, if the plant's curled up a little bit, it'll just snap right off. It means you got it. So we have some pictures to show of that. That's really positive, and that's a good way for guys to be able to look at stuff, because it's a little concerning when they're still green. Without Liberty, you don't get the burner on it. They're curled up and they're green and they're laying there. Well, are they dead? Are they going to pop back? That's why it's important. And it's also important too when we're looking at application as well, because I think on some of those taller plants, you want 32 ounces of Enlist to be doing the work.
Absolutely.
You don't want to cut rate to make sure that you can finish the field. If you have a smaller field and you have the 8 acres left and you have 4 in the tank and you want to cut the rate just so you don't have to go back and remix, you want to make sure that you're using the actual 32 ounce rate, because if we shy that back 10%, 20%, whatever that is, you're down to, 26 ounces of 2,4-D. And the reason that 32 ounce rate is there is because it takes 32 ounces to kill tall, out of control water hemp plants. Yep.
So here we are, July 10th. We're 20 days past the window for spraying Dicamba. The guys are still having an opportunity to go out there and clean things up within the Enlist program, but we're getting toward the end of that window too, aren't we, Ben?
Yep. There are fields up that when I made my trip to northern Iowa, that they have entered the R3 stage or entering the R4 stage. There's a lot of our selling territory that's going to be in that area. The Enlist label reads that you can spray through R2 but not past R3. R3 is anytime you have a pod 3/16 of an inch in length on the main stem. I think it's the top third of the main stem. Once you get to that point, you have to cut off those applications. In a lot of places, we are at that point. So we're done. There will be rescue applications that are probably made off label, but we're past that point. We want to make sure we get it knocked in the head if we don't have it knocked in the head by now. But look at this. We've had an extra 10 days in Iowa and the majority of the nation, in 20 days in Illinois, that we've had this extra growing window, and that's why Enlist E3 soybeans are such a big deal, to be able to go in and make sure you're taking care of those.
Well, at least we don't have to worry about that stuff getting up and moving away on us, even when we're running right up against the window here.
Perfect. Yep. And that's what segues into the next topic here. We've been getting a lot of phone calls, all this area sales managers. It's just that time of year. It's 15 days. It's 10 days after the end of the Dicamba spraying cutoff. Well, it takes 7 to 10 days for Dicamba injury symptoms to start showing up, and growers call and they want to know, at what point does yield start impacting these beans being cupped? At what point, how serious does the injury have to be before yield starts yield losses start to happen? And my thought there is, anytime you get a light dose, if it's volatility, first time, most of the time you're not going to see a yield impact. Most of the time that is a cosmetic hit. We don't want to see it, but it happens. There's a lot of status Diflex and the soybean products, the soybean Dicamba products that are used out there. But most of the time, if we get a volatility hit where it's even all the way across the field and it's just a light cupping, it's cosmetic. Now, if we get physical drift, that's when we're going to start seeing the field edges is cupped up super tight. The opposite end of the field is cupped up less tight. That's where the end rows, headlands of the field are probably at a higher % chance of possibly seeing some yield loss happen. Anytime that the plant is stunted up and causes it to be shorter from a Dicamba drift, you have a higher incidence of yield loss happening at that point. So when you're going out and looking at the field, you want to look in all 4 sides of that field. You want to be able to go out and look and see what the damage is and how it happened and how it occurred and how tightly those leaves are cupped, and that gives you a pretty good idea of what to do. So, Turk, you have had multiple conversations this week. What are your suggestions for guys if they've been hit? Somebody asks you, we get asked all the time, what do you do?
Well, again, I said you have to make sure, my general recommendation is you have to make sure that you have somebody look at it, you document it. Obviously, Bayer and BASF have been paying for all the damage for the last 4 to 5 years with this class action lawsuits that have been filed, and they're paying them. And so you have to make sure that you're documenting those losses and get somebody to come and take a look at it if you can. But there isn't any reason for me to believe that same thing won't happen again. If you have damage this year, the same thing is going to happen again. And I'm just telling everybody, get a hold of your U.S. senators and your U.S. House of Representatives and have the conversation with them. I've had conversations this week with people talking to their state representatives, and the state representatives, in many cases, just say call EPA or we're too busy to come look at it or whatever. But when you call your state representatives and your U.S. representatives and your House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., somebody's going to listen to you. Now, there still may not be anything done, but at least the message is going to get out there more so. It's more widespread this year than what we've seen in the past, in my opinion. I'm getting calls from people in Nebraska and northern Iowa and Wisconsin and all across Illinois, and it's not just the Boot Hill, Missouri this year. It seems like it's everywhere. Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana. So it's pretty widespread this year, and I'm pretty sure we'll start seeing a lot more coverage about it here very very shortly in the media and everything else. But I hope that something can become accomplished this time. You've heard me say in the past, I think it's just a matter of time before this product will be taken off the market again, but we have to go through the process to make that happen. Our U.S. House of Representatives and the EPA could put a stop to it tomorrow, but I don't look for that to happen. But it could.
My suggestion to people is you got to block out the noise. You're hearing a lot of things from the other companies saying that the Enlist was rushed and all this and that, and that's why your beans look the way they are. No, they don't. You need to go out and you need to look at them because there is a reason, whether it's Dicamba or a disease or something in them. There's a reason that they look like that, and if you don't know, call your salesman. Be more than happy to come out and look at it and tell you what the problem is.
Yep, and it's hard because it's really hard to tell sometimes if there's anyone to even blame. It's just a difficult situation because we all want to be able to grow the crops that we want to be able to grow, and we want to be successful with that.
Everybody wants to make the choice that they feel is best for their farm, and so again, I think we've been down this road several years now, and it's the same story every year. Yep. And so hopefully we can get some type of resolution, or maybe at some point down the road there'll be a bean with all the traits in them, and everybody will be happy. But that's not anytime soon for sure.
Correct.
So the markets and the weather this year or this week have kind of been the markets have been just like the weather. Again, it can be up one day and down the next, and depending on what the forecast is, if it's going to rain more tomorrow, and now it's going to rain half what's getting in tomorrow. This weekend, there's a good chance of rain coming across. I see the Dakotas got an inch, pretty widespread, it appears, and maybe a couple, 2 or 3 inches in places. Again, that's still not enough to break the drought for those guys up there. I mean, it is still going to be dry up there, but it's going to help them a lot. And if we can continue to get some rains come along here, it will help them. But again, they're so late, and everything that's going on up there, it's so dry, crops are so short, that it's going to be very, very tough for them to produce any kind of a record crop for sure. And it's not just the Dakotas, it's northwest Iowa. I mean, even northwest Iowa got some rain, but still not enough to help them. Even the rain that is coming through on Friday, that came through on Friday, it didn't get very widespread. I mean, it was basically the southern parts that really were in better shape than the northern parts. So I don't know where we're going here. All I can tell you is that it is not over yet, because these markets are going to come Monday morning. The markets could be up the limit or down the limit. Again, depending on what the rain is and what the forecast is, and then if it was just kind of so-so, they might just keep doing what they're going and just kind of working in a trading range. But it's a long time before this crop is made. We've got to get through pollination, and we've got to get through August for the crop fill. And you've heard me say that before, but same story. But the markets the nearby markets have come back, and when I'm talking about prices I'm talking about, because I assume everybody took advantage of the opportunity to sell that $17 soybeans and $7 corn if it showed itself. I mean, there was those opportunities out there for very brief times, and hopefully everybody cleaned their bins out. So I'm mainly talking about new crop, the opportunity to market this crop that we have in the field right now, and the prices are still, beans are in the teens, and we've still got a 5 in most cases in front of the corn. So,
and that's what people need to remember is, they complain when it goes down the limit, but we're still sitting a lot better now than what we were a year ago. So there's still a lot of positive.
Way better than 2 years ago. So there's a lot of good things out there, and there's still a lot of room for improvement, because it could go up or it could go down from here. There's no doubt about it.
Yep.
So,
Well, do you have a corny joke for us to make Joe proud this week?
actually, I do, Ben. And actually, this one is for you.
Oh gosh.
So you are you're kind of a horse guy, right? Right, Ben?
I think Dan is too.
Oh no, you're our lead horse guy around here, I'm pretty sure.
That's scary.
So
The resident equestrian.
Joe actually sent this to me, just specifically for this Cup of Joe.
Okay.
And so, Ben, what horses keep late hours?
I have no idea.
Nightmares.
Terrible. Yes, nightmares is right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you everyone for joining Cup of Joe this week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.